let anyone else who is in. Just we will wait for the final few seconds to tick down. Plug it in, but don't give me the remote. I see how you are. You're good. You're within range.
We'll give you authority.
Default Celsius.
Yeah.
It's only 19 degrees.
Just got a reminder. All right, looks like it's noon, so we'll go ahead and call to order the special board of directors meeting of the Columbia 911 Communications District here on May 13th, 2025 at 12 p.m. Members present virtually, we have Shelley Hennessy and why am I spacing Brian? Is it Tiani?
Tierney. Yep.
Tiani, sorry. So first name down. Physically present, we have Henry Heimuller, Jeff Flack, and Rob Anderson. Let's see. Let's into roll call. For sakes of the first item on the agenda, we are going to go into executive session under ORS 192.660 subsection 2H, legal counsel. And we will go ahead and announce when we are done with our executive session.
Hold up the seat there for you if you want it.
All righty, we exited executive session at 12:17. Waited here about a minute, so our public waiting had a chance to make it back from outside into the building. And we'll go ahead and resume our normal open meeting session here at 12:18. I guess one thing that's not on the agenda, first of all, I didn't ask earlier, is there any changes or additions to the agenda? I believe the current agenda is posted online, correct?
Yes.
All right. And perfect. And I see on here, we have emergency roof repair options. That was staff going to start with any info or?
I think we could, if Merck's, you wanna, or Nathan?
Just a quick background on it.
Sure. So, what we're talking about here is the repair of the roof. With the discoveries of existing damage and the current temporary repair in place, we have a need to have a lasting solution to the condition of the roof of the building. We have been working with Lower Columbia Engineering to develop a scope of work for what that repair may look like, and have the options to discuss how far we would like to take that repair as either a minimum repair of a perimeter or a full roof replacement, as the board may deem appropriate.
And you went ahead and coordinated to have Andrew here from Lower Columbia here to help with any technical questions for us.
Yes, it's Andrew Nemi, Lower Columbia Engineering, our expert.
Thank you for attending.
Yeah, you bet. Short walk. Getting over here.
I guess the big question is for the board is looking at knowing that this has been ongoing, discovering more and more and a little bit more here and there, knowing that our roof is 25 to 30 years old. And I don't know what the original warranty would have been, about 25-ish or
Of the original?
Less than that.
less than that. Okay, so we're past the original warranty is, we want to make a sound, informed decision on knowing all that, whether it's to bite the bullet and just replace the whole roof with something that is going to be under warranty versus doing just repair of a certain amount of area. And I forget what percentage is it, do you know roughly that be repaired? That needs repair?
Well, it's complicated like most things. It's not like
I don't think something you can quantify as a percentage like of the surface area because the issues for the most part are around the perimeter of the building. And as is usually the case with roofs, the devil's in the details, as they say. It's at those transitions, there's a lot of features on this roof. There's the solar tubes that bring light into the building. There's basically an external structural system where you've got these beams that are like ribs sticking up on the building. So, flat roofs are not ideal in this country, as I think you all can recognize for the obvious reasons. And then we've got these additional complexities of these beams that are exposed and the fact that there have not most recently been gutters on the building. I think in that inspection report that was done some time ago, the gutters were identified as a problem. They'd basically been backing up, and probably the fact that those terminations maybe originally were not done around the perimeter of the roof. The fact that the gutters were backing up kind of exacerbated that issue associated with those roofing details around the perimeter of the building. So I don't think you can really say it's, this percent of the roof is damaged. Getting back to that question about repair versus total replacement, the comfort with doing a repair, I feel like that is something that you're going to be able to get bids on, that you'll be able to make the decision, hiring a contractor with a more definitive price for the repairs. Whereas, pretty simply, I think in that bid package, and Michael and I talked about this, you could put an option in that bid package with the details we've included to also provide a total replacement for the roofing system itself. The big unknown with doing a total roof replacement, in my opinion, are the surprises that are going to pop up. That asterisk that a contractor is going to put on their bid that doesn't include structural repairs that are inevitably going to be discovered as part of that total roof replacement. We can already tell from looking around the perimeter of the building where the roofing membrane has been pulled up that there is some rot damage to the roof deck around the perimeter. You always hope that it's isolated to those areas you can see, but inevitably there's going to be more surprises that pop up. If you tear that membrane completely off, there's I'm going to assure you there's going to be some random spots where, oh yeah, we replaced this decking. And like Michael and I talked about, you can pretty easily in your bid also get a price per panel or per square foot for roof deck replacement. Where it starts to get fuzzier and less comfortable is if the damage goes beyond the deck itself and gets into structural members. Is there rot in beams? And that's where the real complexity, in my opinion, lies in this decision that you have before you. Is if you just do the repair, you were really getting that roof system back to where it ideally would have been with the original roof installation that was done, where you're cleaning up those details around the perimeter, hopefully getting gutters reinstalled that perform as gutters should. But if you don't do the total roof replacement, and we've identified there's probably some framing issues, you're leaving those undiscovered, right? So that's kind of what you're weighing here, is the repair option is going to be most cost effective and most comfortable. The roof replacement is probably most expensive, more comforting, but one of the reasons that replacement or repair option is more comfortable is because you're not addressing some of those structural issues that may exist. So that's the big challenge here, in my opinion.
Andrew, is there any way to see the roof from underneath? I mean, in this particular building, can we send somebody up in there to look at the plywood and that from the bottom side? Because that certainly should show us areas where there is existing leaks or damage, and maybe give us some kind of an idea to be able to say, yeah, let's just repair those 4 spots in addition to the other stuff. Just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question, Henry. And I don't know, Merck's might have a little better feel for how accessible those structural members are from the inside. We have not done any sort of assessment. If that hasn't been done, we could help with that, or Merck's may have an idea how it's really a question of, can you see that structure?
Yeah, exactly.
All these suspended ceiling tiles.
So above the ceiling tiles, so in the drop ceiling, we do have a moisture barrier and then blown-in insulation for the interior. So that would be a significant excavation project, removing that and performing that type of inspection. I'm not sure if that's done commercially, but
I'm just, yeah, could somebody burrow their way up through one spot and then just kind of crawl from end to end, or is this the stuff they're gonna be crawling on?
so to actually observe the underside of the roof sheathing or the framing, you would need to remove the blown-in insulation
Mhm.
as well as the moisture barrier, which I don't know if there is a way of doing in a quick automated process. We've actually removed and replaced some of that off the water intrusion, and it's been a significantly labor-intensive project. So
And this cannot support anybody crawling through it. So it's just this drop ceiling, wires in open air, then that moisture barrier, and then the blown-in insulation, and then the roof.
So the reason we wouldn't see water leakage out here is because of that moisture barrier.
it is possible. I think some of the concerns would be areas where there may have been moisture exposure to the roof sheathing. Not a large amount of water, dripping, not actually dripping, but just anywhere that barrier has been slightly compromised, allowed a small amount of water to intrude. Actually, much like what we found around the perimeter of the building. These were not really active leaks. It was just the moisture sheathing being exposed, and then we don't, I guess, without some excavation, we don't really know how much further that may have gone. But
So the way to say it, the membrane, so white plastic, then we'll say like wood, plywood, OSB something, and then a vapor barrier. So there's a chance if we look underneath, it could have gotten to the OSB or the plywood, but not necessarily made it to the vapor barrier. Is what I get out of what you're saying.
exactly, yeah, we possibly think that moisture intrude, possibly some damage, but not anything we would detect without significant excavation.
I'd like to add something here, Henry, direct to your question. So I've tried a number of cases dealing with water infiltration, particularly in roofing matters. And what makes it so difficult, and I think Andrew probably has the same kind of experience, is that even though it leaks in area A, that leak may originate far over in area D, and it just travels in very odd ways. And so even if you were to open it up and look above you and say, oh, look there's a leak, well, above that may not be the place of the leak. It could be much further away. So that's one issue. And the second is, once you invade that area and compromise the integrity of the current system, I'm just not real comfortable with that. But again, I'd like to hear Andrew address that, because I'm not the builder. I just end up trying these kinds of cases too often.
Yeah, I agree with what Michael says, that leak could telegraph itself and not give you a false sense of where it's coming from, especially when you have that vapor barrier like Merckx is describing, because, inevitably it's not going to show itself exactly where it's originating at. So that's one of the big challenges. One thing I'll add, that in my walking the roof, and that's one of the reasons, in my opinion, the repair option is a totally reasonable approach to take. The field of the roofing, the vinyl membrane itself, actually, I would say, is in relatively good condition. You don't see tears or damage. So it seemed a little bit like, my first inclination was, for what it's worth, when I got up there, was, well, it would seem a little wasteful to just tear this whole membrane off. and replace it with another brand new membrane. Because those membranes themselves, in my opinion, they last a long time. It's usually, like I say, it's the terminations that cause you problems, not the field itself. And so, and there is a process like our details lay out for welding, adding on to that membrane, working with the existing material. So, and I also, when walking around on the roof, you get up on some of those old roofs and you're like, whoa, there's a soft spot. And it's not like we, felt our way around the entire roof system here, but, I didn't really get that vibe that, oh boy, be careful where you step, there's rotten wood in a considerable number of places. So I think that's relevant that, the deck itself, for what it's worth, felt sound walking on it, and that membrane itself seems to be in relatively good condition.
Andrew, just knowing the roof on the building the way it is, I mean, and it's been in all these separate sections, 3 different construction projects here. Would this be the time to consider putting a peaked roof on this building and, going just to a metal, some kind of thing? I mean, let's say a new roof costs us $150,000 plus the underneath stuff, which let's just round the number up to $250,000. Is there a way to reasonably do something like that may stop us from having this problem 25 years down the road?
Yeah, good question. The big challenge with that, and we did do that. We've done that on a couple buildings in town that had flat roofs. One of them that comes to mind is the Columbia Community Mental Health Facility, kind of across the street from the administrative offices for the fire department. That had a flat roof, you may recall. That's a residence hall now, I believe, for the mental health facility. And we put trusses on that to solve some of the problems they were having with roof leaks. The big challenge there is what the building code says is that if you do anything to add load to a structural element, you're opening up Pandora's box and required to analyze the structure as though it was new construction. So you're basically if you were to add a peaked roof to this building, because you're adding to the height of it, adding to the wind exposure, the seismic loads, we would be required then to analyze the base structure to make sure it could resist the loads as though this was a new building, which, that would snowball and most likely.
And that just sent us to $500,000.
Yeah, and that happens.
Forget I asked.
And which would make us have to be compliant with any changes in fire code or anything else also that's occurred since the building was
That's a kind of another.
on the percentage of work done.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily open up the whole code analysis, but for sure, at the very least, it would open up the structural issues as though it was new construction, which in and of themselves, you start to deal with that snowball effect. We haven't talked at all about some of the other building exterior issues, but if you were going to, for instance, have to reinforce the lateral force resisting system, the shear walls associated with the building, then you'd be all of a sudden redoing the whole exterior. So it's just that snowball of costs. So.
Yeah, you just said other exterior issues.
Well, I think it can't be ignored that there are probably other sources of water intrusion with the building. We talked about the fact that a flat roof's not ideal. Not having eaves is always just another challenge that unfortunately this building is a reality associated with this building. So it's more important then to have the gutters and properly maintaining those gutters when you don't have an eave, because if there's any sort of failure with the gutter itself, you're immediately then spilling that water onto the wall of the building, which of course kind of floods the siding in areas. And the single wall construction associated with these buildings, it's a little harder to deal with preventing water intrusion around windows and features like that. And so, it's one of those deals, once again, if you had the budget to do a full overhaul of the building, that would be another area we would be looking at, and could, if there are specific areas where it's been identified that water's coming in through the vertical the wall system there, it might be worth looking at improvements around some of those windows. But once again, that's another one of those areas that can snowball, right? It's like, okay, if we're going to open up the start redoing flashing around windows, then do we look at residing the whole building? And so I'm not trying to overcomplicate this discussion here, but if you're gonna, this kind of gets into, Michael and I talked a little bit about this, with this roof repair, are you looking at a specifically roofing specialist as your contractor, or are you looking at a general contractor that would bring in a roofing specialist as a subcontractor? And that's where I think you do have to consider, are there other improvements to the building worth making at the same time? Because if you're going to bring in a general contractor, I think then that makes a little bit more sense to look at, okay, bang for your buck, if there are siding deficiencies, should you be looking at those at the same time to get the best bang for your buck if you're bringing in a general contractor?
So our initial repair plan was to repair and the flanges that are over the seams of the modular, different phases of the building, right?
So we discussed some time ago after we had a leak in December, a leak along one of these ridge beams, away from the perimeter of the building. That was a failure of these metal coping pieces or the fasteners keeping the metal coping attached to the building. The repairs that or the scope of work for repairs that Lower Columbia Engineering has supplied also includes replacing those coping pieces and making sure those fasteners are properly sealed.
So understanding how difficult it is to locate a potential leak and maybe damage underneath, but under those flanges, would that be a place that you can roll back the existing membrane to a point? Is that a logical place to kind of explore whether or not those have been the sources of leaks and subsequent damage?
Yeah, and that is one benefit with a membrane is you can, it's not continuously attached like, say, composition roofing would be or metal roofing. So yeah, anywhere you're working, and we've worked that into the notes of these plans currently, that the contractor is on the hook for doing some level of investigation. And, if they discover any damage, pausing, bringing that discussion up for consideration. And, there's some of these things that are going to come with different levels of comfort or discomfort with a contractor, in my opinion. That discussion about warranty, right? When you're doing a repair, in my opinion, it's important to find a contractor that is on board, that's a team member, that's really, interested in looking out for your best interests and willing to stand behind their work, which not to bring up all the complexities associated with how you bid a project and what type of contractor you go after. But, I would say like 2-3 years ago, I would have been not very positive that we were going to find a contractor that was even willing to look at this project because the capacity was spread so thin out there. Contractors were kind of cherry picking the projects that were really clean, didn't come with much risk. It's getting to be a little bit better bidding climate right now to where I am a little bit more confident that we will be able to find a contractor that's willing to work with you. And yeah, we're on board. You always want in a project like this, a contractor that believes in the approach. If it's a contractor that's, right out of the gate, like skeptical about doing the repair as compared to a total replacement, that in my opinion is not the contractor for you. So, these are all important considerations. But to your original question, Brian, I do think that's important that the contractor is not one of those that's looking for more problems just so that they have, can mine for change orders, so to speak, but that they're honestly, we're going to, do what we can to help identify other potential areas for concern.
I think in the replace scenario, and making sure that we're not just covering up existing damage outside of the perimeter that we know visually that we can see that there's been some damage. It seems logical that if we could visually inspect kind of along those where the metal flange, I'm not saying that right, whatever the apparatuses.
Coping, I think is.
Coping, yeah. It just is another way to kind of narrow down potential damaged areas.
Yeah, I believe the seams under the coping, where the membrane meets under the coping is, it is supposed to be welded along those seams, to my understanding.
Okay.
Although the failures may present opportunities to look in there, but I don't know if, I'm not sure how good of a look we'd actually get while doing that work. Yeah, Andrew, I'm sure has more familiarity.
No, this is a good discussion point because we have not, seen any of that exposed. Like our observations were limited to what we could see when we went up there, which that was primarily around the perimeter. So these copings that we're talking about, it's basically this exposed beam that if you go up on the roof, you're just seeing these ribs essentially, which are the structural beams carrying the load over the building. And so what we see when we look at that currently, there's a metal cap over the beam. So you can't tell if that membrane is continuous and welded underneath the cap or not. I wouldn't be surprised if the membrane just comes up and is terminated underneath the cap. That would be a pretty easy investigation to execute, though, to pull off a cap in an area and take a look, because if it's not welded, I think you could more easily do some investigation. If it's currently already welded, our details call for redoing those caps, but I don't think you'd want to go cut that membrane just to have a look.
Yeah.
If it's already welded. So that is maybe some investigation worth carrying out.
Well, it seems like from what you said earlier, that the membrane up there maybe could last us another 25 years.
I think so. I don't know if anyone would warranty it for 25 years, but that wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, if the details, the weak link, so to speak, around the perimeter and along those copings were corrected.
And I would imagine that a roofing contractor replacing the roof is not going to give us a 25-year warranty on a new roof, or maybe they would, I don't know. But I guess the point of the matter is with a flat roof in Northwest Oregon, even a brand spanking new roof up there could have water intrusion somewhere if the job's not done correctly that we wouldn't discover for 5 years or some period of time down the road. So I think that it really is quite a consideration to get a good contractor, but then also, like you say, if putting a new roof on is the most prudent thing to do, then that's really what we ought to do. But on the other side of that, if spending half as much money and fixing it and getting, another 20, 25 years out of it, that might be the prudent thing to do too. So I don't know how we make that decision without kind of getting down the path of finding that good contractor that you're talking to.
Yeah, and that's just a reality of it nowadays. Like I mentioned, I would have been nervous a few years ago whether we would get any bids, but you really still, even today, you don't know, are you going to get one interested contract? If you send this out, say to 4, all 4 might be comfortable bidding it. None, maybe. I don't think that would be the case. I think you'd get 2, hopefully 3 bids if you sent it out to 4. But I think that is in my opinion, that's a logical step, is to take it to the point of whether it's an invitation to bid or, Michael would probably have a good feel for the process that made the most sense. But you really, you don't know for sure what all your options are until you put it out there. And I think it'd be pretty easy to bid this with the details you've got and even get an option for a total replacement. And I still think we have some time. I talked to Michael about this, it's obvious, but worth saying, this is a repair that in my opinion should be done like in the mid-July to mid-September timeframe. So we don't have a lot of time, but we do have time, I think, to bid this and then still pivot if necessary.
Henry and the board, I think that when you're weighing this, I think what other repairs, and so I've heard that there are some siding repairs as you enter the building, the window to the left, the decorative board above the window, that was leaking. That had to be caulked. That's certainly a concern. There's some penetrations on the back of the building. I don't know if that's enough to hire a general contractor, because if we hire a general contractor, and this is the pluses and the minuses, they're going to want a percentage over the whole deal. Then you have a roofing contractor, and let's say his bid's 150, then the roofing contractor wants that profit and overhead. So we have to be economically smart about going directly to the roofing contractor. And then if we have other work, going to a GC that can do a little bit that we need. Or is it such that the enough work on the roof with the substrate and the decking that you want the, who's going to do it? Is it the roofing contractor with his forces, or is it the GC? I think it would be the roofing contractor. Normally, that's what they do. Andrew, thoughts on that?
Yeah, usually roofing contractors, they would be comfortable if it's replacing sheathing, for instance, they'd be comfortable with that. One thing that good points Michael brings up about the extra costs associated with rolling in a GC. You've got that extra layer of profit and overhead that a GC is going to charge. I do think that a general contractor would get a little better pricing probably from a roofing subcontractor that they regularly work with. So that maybe does counter the extra percentage that a GC is marking up the contract a bit. You're definitely going to pay more. I know it has been brought up. I think that in my opinion, it'd be hard to find. I don't have a lot of experience with any of the local roofing contractors that have experience with a single ply vinyl membrane like this. I don't want to speak for them. There are GCs that I know of that would have worked with a single ply membrane roofing contractor. So, I'm a local guy. I advocate for local businesses. I don't feel like, you're not going to make a decision to hire somebody because they're local, but I personally feel that local contractors do have a higher degree of accountability, and that does carry some, in my opinion, that's a qualification in and of itself. Not everybody sees this the same way, but like we talked about, where it's important to have a contractor that really is a team member and has your best interest at heart, I think you have a better chance at getting that from a local contractor. And I feel like if you do open it up to general contractors, you're going to have a better chance at bringing in a local, if that makes sense.
Well, as long as there's, like you said, a local that is able and has the capacity to do this job,
Yeah.
and hopefully we would find one. But back to Michael, your point on the other repairs, is there a reason we couldn't just use Premier or somebody like that that's already doing this repair work? When you're talking about, caulking windows and repairing that rotten siding that's back there in the other conference room and some of that stuff. Those seem like maintenance things to me, at least, until you get to talking about replacing the entire envelope of the building. If we're just fixing spots here and there, isn't that something we can do right now?
We certainly could do that. There's some challenges here. They've been their estimate was more than the actual cost, which is good news. They could be under 50,000, and they're motivated to stay under 50,000 so that they don't have to pay prevailing wage rates. I think it's a great idea, Henry, and I think we should follow it up. And I think what we should do is to make sure that to get the work, we need to get a detail of work that needs to be done, what siding needs to be pulled off and redone, what windows need to be pulled and check with the flashing. I mean, the known problems. And let's get a list going and perhaps Nathan and Merck can get that list going. Maybe we can get Andrew and his crew to check some things too on the perimeter and make sure, and then maybe we'll say to Premier, okay, get your subcontractors over there to do this other work because they've all been CGIS reviewed. And we've got a really good working crew right now, and Premier's been doing a very good job. So, yeah.
If I may jump in, so yeah, Premier has been fantastic addressing, you know, issues as we have found them, related to the work that they're doing. They, you know, we identified that leak above a window that has been caulked. What definitely needs to happen, for building exterior, we actually have worked with a contractor recommended by Premier to put together some sense of the scale, the scope of this. That estimate's come in north of $50,000, I think 58,000. To move forward with that, we will need to develop a formal scope of work and go forward with a formal process. Yeah, so we're, as far as identifying all of the different issues, a big part of it is repainting. Probably half of that cost is just repainting, which definitely needs to happen, as well as addressing a couple of hardy panels that are replaced, and a lot of recocking. That does not include Z flashing all of the windows. That I'm sure would be another significant cost.
And just Henry and the board, for me, caulking is a temporary. I'm just not a fan of caulking, and when I do construction defect litigation and when I review contracts, when I work with contractors, caulking is nice for a lot of different reasons, but for water infiltration, you want Z flashing, other kind of flashing, and that caulking is nice, but you got to have I'll call it the infrastructure that sheds that water away because caulking cracks. Caulking is kind of a temporary thing. So yeah.
I'd echo that 100%. If caulking's solving the problem, it's going to get you 2 years at best. And with a couple of weather cycles, it's going to fail and you'll be right back where you were again. So
Isn't that what we've been using for 30 years though?
caulking,
So
yeah,
a lot of the issues that we have found is, well, we currently have no gutters in the building, which means we have water running directly against it. You know, with those gutters in place, a lot of the stuff doesn't have direct water exposure. So it does not need to be so protected, at least as it's been installed. I don't know if that's best practice, but it is what is in place. So we have, without the gutters in place, we have been finding all places that were only caulked. So yeah, part of restoring the water envelope would be restoring that caulking, or coming up with some other way to protect those, you know, every utility box attached to the building, that type of stuff, long term with some type of flashing.
So this is beyond an emergency roof repair, which is what's been described in your memo.
Yeah, this would be a different project. Unless we wanted to have one GC try to, you know, to do all of it. But
So trying to get back on topic about the roof here real quick. I was just curious, Brian and Shelley. I know when you're online, sometimes it's hard to get a word in. Do you have any questions?
I do not. I actually did have some, but between yourself, Rob, and Henry, you've actually asked some of the questions I wanted to ask. So I've gotten mine answered. So I appreciate that. Thank you. So I have nothing further at this time.
Yeah, I
Shelley?
don't have any additional questions either. I think you guys are answering anything that I'd even thought of, so.
So we get back to repair or replacement. With the caveat of course, like I said, you never know until you fully expose. So even repair could end up
I think,
snowballing a little bit.
think we'd have to just go out for a bid on one, either or. I mean, if we get the right contractor that gets up there and just like Andrew says, says, hey, there's no reason to replace this whole roof and, for $50,000 or $75,000, we can make it last another X number of years. Fine, or we get the same contractor that gets up there and starts goofing around and says, there's no way to make this thing work without a replacement. It almost seems like we need to bid for a contractor more than we need to bid for a project, because we really don't know what the actual best way of doing the project is. I mean, that's just seems to be I mean, if we have to spend all the money, let's spend all the money, but I guess, if we go out for bid again and the $150,000 bids are all a year old at least.
No, these were gathered a couple months ago.
Oh, just a couple of months
However,
ago.
they were under an emergency process. We would need to have a proper scope of work so that they were properly aligned and get a final set from all of them. So that, the final cost might vary a bit, but.
And then, of course, knowing that whatever that bid is plus the unknowns.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I kind of like the repair idea with the caveat that Andrew was talking about, where it's, once you get into it, and Henry mentioned it as well, okay, now we need to replace, once you get into it, because you just don't know what you got until you get in there. But with, hopefully we can do a repair and we're good.
And so if it goes the repair route, I don't know how readily available materials are. Is it something that you would normally expect them to have enough on hand in case they were to find additional deficits that need to be addressed?
Yeah, they should.
If it kind of transitioned toward a replacement, that's not something where we're going to have to stop mid-project and wait X amount of time for more materials.
Yeah, I would be surprised if any of these materials are hard to get.
So what I'm hearing, and my recommendation, and I think Andrew supports this, is to go ahead and we'll do a bid process that seeks alternatives, repair and replacement, bidding off the same plans. If Andrew, you can go ahead and verify that the plans will serve for both, and then I think the board can see the differential, and then I think you're in a better position to award the contract to the lowest responsible bidder based on either a repair or a replacement.
One reality I'd prepare you for, I don't know, Merch, if that bid that you got for the roof replacement included the new gutters around, but that's gonna be, in either case, we're recommending the gutters, so that's an expense that's, considerable.
and we're just talking about the main part of the building or all three sections?
All three sections.
Okay.
So Merck, and to Henry's question, Merck, I pulled up one of the bids and it has building A and building B. When you talk about all three sections, and the bidders are talking about building A and B, are we saying the same thing or are we talking about something
Yeah.
different?
Same thing. It's a modular building that was constructed in 3 sections, but of course, the main building and the conference room, the MIC that we are in now, visually look like they're part of the same building. The other one is visually a bit more distinct, but yeah, it would be the entire building. The roof on the MIC side of the building is a little bit younger, but still had that observed deterioration. Still is going to need to be repaired or replaced. As same applies to the extension. A bit younger. One would hope would be in better condition, but is also very much has observed damage. Experienced the same failure of termination bars as the rest of the structure. Is in need of work.
How long, what's the turnaround time is it looking at for getting bids? Knowing that we're looking at July and September work period window.
So I think that's Michael might have some more insight on this. The groups that we contacted for that initial emergency repair got back to us pretty quickly. First thing we would need is to get this contract put together and then head into ITB or RFP process. So I don't know if Michael has any insight there.
I don't have a firm opinion yet, but my tendency to be, because of the unique nature of the contracting services that we need and to pre-qualify the contractor, I tend to think that it would be an ITB process. We do have 3 responding contractors before. I need to talk to Andrew about pre-qualifying at least 2 of them. I know one is qualified. So we need to do some homework, and so we try to look at the getting a bid early June. That may be a little optimistic, but and we need to get on their schedules to get that work done in July and August is what we're hoping.
Right, their work schedule are starting to, I'm sure other people are eyeing the same work window. For why we would like it. So pretty much from what I'm getting here in a consensus wise is that it's to move forward with obtaining bids for both a repair and replacement to compare the two. And to have those bids meet the qualifications that you have discussed, Michael, regarding pre-quals and everything else.
Okay.
Everyone in agreement?
Yeah, I think that I would just have the language read something more like repair and if necessary, replacement. That we don't want to give folks the ability to just see more money, But our goal would be the least cost option that gives us a long-term outcome.
Andrew, is there anything you see that we're might not have talked about or might want to add to our consideration?
I think that covers it. I think with what you've got, you could pretty easily get bids for the repair and then an option to replace it. Just to compare it to really know what you're dealing with there.
And then next for both staff and for Michael, do you need a formal motion or are you good with the consensus of the board at this point? Or if you are going out for bids, is it best for us to make a motion now?
Well, I think the motion is to proceed to go out to bid, and then so that would be the motion, and then once we bring the bids back, then the board can make a decision what bid to accept under what premise, repair or replacement.
Perfect. In that case, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll second it.
I'm just trying to figure out you just want a motion that says authorizes you to put together a formal bid?
Yeah, the motion, I think the motion would be authorize legal and staff to commence a bid process for either roof replacement or repair.
And so you're jotting that down, Mary Jo, if you could go ahead and repeat that. Jot it down. I know.
Authorizing legal and staff to commence with a bid process for repair or replacement of the roof.
So move.
It's been moved. Brian, I think you had seconded last
Yeah,
time before we had the
seconded it.
motion established. So you're
Okay, yeah,
seconding
I'll
this,
second it.
so you're seconding this one? Okay.
Yes, sir.
It's been moved and seconded to move forward as discussed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes. All right. Like, is there any other questions for Andrew? Well, he's here.
Thanks for helping us out and getting this far, Andrew.
You bet. Pleasure. Good to see you all.
Thank you very much.
Yep,
Thanks,
just let me know if
Andrew.
any questions come up. See you, Michael.
And with that, we will once again be going into executive session. Here at 1308 under ORS 192-660, again, subsection 2 and H, discussions with legal counsel. Gonna start recording. You got recording back done. You're gonna get the door. Excellent. All right, we have exited executive session. We're back in a normal session here at 2:14 in the afternoon. So yeah, I believe there is no other business on the agenda. And just let me go ahead and do our next meeting. Our next regular meeting is on the
I'm not gonna be here.
second.
No, that week.
Okay,
Yeah, and I think I will be here on the 22nd. However, the following meeting in June, I can possibly zoom in on that meeting, but I will not be here.
Brian, do you know if you'll be able to attend the 22nd?
Yeah,
Or
I'll
yes,
be
Mar-
there. I'm not sure if it'll be in person or Zoom, but I'll be there.
Okay, so Mary and Joel, are you following up? Are there any other comments?
Good work, everybody.
All right, thank you, everyone. And we'll be adjourned here at 2:15.